So welcome, first of all. My name is Allan Laframboise. I'm a geo developer and a front-end developer for Esri. And just so you know, you can get all of the slides for this presentation at slides.com/Laframboise. And you get extra bonus points if you can pronounce my name correctly by the end of the presentation. Okay, so we're going to talk about designing great UX UI using something called Calcite Maps. And just a quick show of hands, how many people here have experience with Calcite Maps today? Okay, and what about Bootstrap developers? Just a show of hands, used Bootstrap before? Okay, great. And how many people would just consider themselves more just their core designer? That's their role at their organization, is more on the design side. Okay, cool. Okay, thank you very much. So we'll jump right in and just a short discussion here. And actually, just to give you guys a little tidbit of some of the other things on the agenda, at 5:30 tonight, I'll be doing another presentation on user experience interface design. We're going to focus a lot more on the theory of design, and we have some really cool apps to show, and apps that I'm going to release the source code for as well. So that's tonight, 5:30, and that's in Primrose. Okay, so to design great mapping apps, what are the ingredients? Like for every strong project, there's the strategy. The project is only as strong as the strategy is. And when we talk about strategy, we're talking about the vision. The vision takes in consideration the user needs, the business needs. And the thing that's most often left out of all of our application development and design projects is, how do we measure success? How do we know someone actually likes what we've produced? Have we created a map and deployed it to the internet, and we're just assuming people are enjoying what they're seeing and they're getting satisfaction and they're having a positive user experience? So that's something we're going to talk a lot about tonight. But I wanted to point out these two things. The other thing I think that is also extremely important in successful design of any mapping application is having a design system in place. A design system can mean a lot of things, but to me it means like the principles and patterns and methodologies that your organization adopts and uses. And a lot of times this includes a style guide. You have these pieces in place when you go to take on projects and projects in the future, and you have a design system that everyone, all the teams agree upon, then you can move forward a lot more quickly and a lot more successfully. Just a little bit of history on this word called calcite. And you might have seen this over the years, but basically this is an internal design system that we use at Esri. And you've actually seen calcite manifest itself in ArcGIS Pro. It was one of the first iterations and implementations of it. The ArcGIS JavaScript 4.0 API obviously has a different look and feel than some of the earlier products. That has been influenced by calcite, by the design system, by a set of colors, a set of icons, UI elements, and interactions that we agreed upon as an organization that we are going to build towards, okay? So I can't, again, emphasize more how important it is to put together a set of principles and patterns, and at the end of the day, a style guide will get you extremely far. Instead of different departments building in different directions with different styles and looks and feels, and somebody likes blue and somebody likes red, and you can get over all of that by having a style guide. And that's really helped us develop uniform systems, uniform application at Esri itself. And of course, everything's geocentric. So I want to get into some of the projects that you're going to find out in the wild that have the word calcite in it as an example. So Calcite Web is the first one. So Calcite Web is a web framework we developed at Esri so we could develop web pages for our landing sites. So for Esri.com and for developers at ArcGIS.com. It's essentially Esri's version of Bootstrap, is another way to think about it. If you know what Bootstrap is, then now you know what Calcite Web is. It's a branding guide that we use, all the styles for the web pages so that everything is uniform. It implements and it borrows from that core project, the core principles that are founded in the Calcite design platform. So we use colors and fonts and icons. They're not just specific to web, but they borrow from other parts of the platform as well. It's super lightweight, fast, responsive. It's SaaS built, and Sports.js has some great documentation and good stuff. So let me just take you out to where this guy lives. So we're on github.com, Esri, and Calcite Web is where we're starting. So I'm just going to jump into the documentation here and just show you a few things that might be of interest. The first thing is, we needed to agree upon type. What type we're going to use for our applications and our web pages and so forth. And we agreed upon Avenir Next being the major type font that we use. It may not be the type font for you, but in our case, you do the research and you look at what it offers in terms of its styling, it really was the one to choose for us. There's a grid system that's a little bit different than grid systems you might be familiar with. Like for Bootstrap, as an example, it uses 12 grids. In our particular case, we use 24 grids, and it's based on column width and pixels rather than percentages. So that's a little bit different. Other things that might be handy to you, so if you're looking at this project and saying, well, why am I looking or even interested in a project that Esri uses to build out their web pages? Well, there are all these cool fonts that you might be interested in. So you could grab any of the fonts if you want. So there are things like pins, and then there are collections of layers and so forth. So this is a free resource for you as you may be building out your applications, your web mapping applications. Colors are always a conundrum. It's nice to have a set of colors that somebody has thought about and put together. For example, just like a simple set of gray shades that have like an equal interval of staggering of saturation and hue and so forth. So I use this all the time. You can grab any of these guys, you can inspect them and take a look at the hex value, grab that and implement it. And you'll be guaranteed that what you see is what you're gonna get. And then there are UI color sets. There's blues, there's some oranges and greens and purples. You'll see a whole number of them here. I'm not saying you have to use them, but if you're looking for some options, then they're here. Then you'll find other standard things like buttons. So we use non-rounded corners, which are basically square corners. Right? And then we have different color sets that we can use, and color has meaning, and it has the same meaning everywhere. Success as an example for things like successful operations on the website when you log in or sign in, and then there's other labels for other things too. So we have drop downs, there's different loaders, there's different panels. Something that we use extensively, just kind of the new style of designing web pages, is using these cards. You can use cards for almost anything, right? So I encourage you to check them out if you're looking for some design pattern options. I think that's one of the coolest parts of the Calcite Web framework. Then there's examples of patterns and all kinds of good things. The last thing I just wanted to show you here is taking a look at some coding style guides. This is always the center of attraction for a lot of projects at organizations, and that is, how do we style our HTML or our CSS? So we spent a little bit of time doing some research and coming up with some patterns that work for us. Simple things like, just using two-space tabs for elements and other things. Like, for example, if we go to CSS, how exactly should our CSS, be stacked and staggered, and what order, for example, should the different elements come in. So if you're looking for some guidelines and so forth for your organization, then why not borrow from some of the things that you see here for Calcite Web? So that's why I'm showing you this project. It's what we use to maintain synchronicity across all of the teams. And to give you an example of what it looks like, that's it. So if you've been to developers, then you've seen Calcite Web in action. Everything implemented here was implemented with that framework. Is that cool? All right, so now you know it's there. You know there are some resources that may be of valuable to you as a web mapping app developer. Another project you're going to find out there is called Calcite Bootstrap. This is essentially a theme that sits on top of Bootstrap, and some people will say that it's Bootstrap calcified. Right? So, and again, it's our design patterns and principles and colors and everything implemented on top of that. So there are some projects like, if you're familiar with Open Data, when you go to Open Data and you customize your page, that's built with Calcite Bootstrap, now you know. All right, so we maintain that externally. This may or may not be of use to you, but it's here and I'm telling you about it. What I really want to get on to today is this thing called Calcite Maps. That's what we're here for. I want to talk to you about the framework, how it can be used, what can be done with it, and so forth. So Calcite Maps is Bootstrap. Let's just start there. It is the Bootstrap framework. So that means it is a lot of things. It's responsive. It's going to work well on mobile and on desktop devices. It also has a few tiny components to build out the mapping framework. So it has some very small map app framework components, styles built in there to handle what we need to do as mapping app developers. It also borrows from Calcite. So it borrows from all of the awesome principles that have been instilled in all of our product development, and it includes the themes, colors, fonts, and icons that have already been proven. They already work. They're already out there, which is super awesome. It's a framework, and it really doesn't matter what API you plug in. So you can plug in the JS 3x, 4x, or Esri leaflet, or standard leaflet, or your favorite API, and it'll just work. Because it's just like Bootstrap, right? Bootstrap doesn't care what mapping framework you use. So that's kind of a nicety here too. Now, you'll get a lot further, a lot faster if you're using one of the ArcGIS APIs, because there are some things in there to make it easier for you. Then of course, desktop and mobile friendly. And the whole impetus is that I think it's a frustration that I've felt for many years, and that's, I generally have a very short amount of time to build an application. And the last thing I want to deal with is styling and some framework issues and so forth. I just need something that's just ready to grab and go. It's easy, I can style it really fast, and I don't need to think about it a whole lot, and it's just going to work always, everywhere. And that's what Calcite Maps is all about. That was the impetus. Now this project's been around for about a year, maybe a little bit more than a year now. So it's definitely had some maturity to it, and we'll talk about sort of how it's sort of grown in a second here. Let's talk about Bootstrap just real quick. For those people that aren't that familiar with Bootstrap, again, just a web framework. It's probably the most popular one in the world. It starts with the grid system, where you have 12 columns, and you can determine how your page is laid out by putting certain content in certain columns. And when your page collapses, then your columns are going to turn into rows and stack and do all this good stuff. So Bootstrap has figured that out really well, and people have adopted it. It's got all of the usual suspects, just like we have for Calcite Web. We have colors for buttons, and certain colors mean certain things. Now these are just sort of templates. You can override everything. You actually can do custom builds right from here as well to build out your own Bootstrap CSS if you want to. So that's the foundation. That's CSS. Bootstrap, I think one of the reasons it's so popular is because it has components. It has something called a nav bar. So if you need to build nav in your app, with drop downs and these kinds of things, it just has that, so you can grab them. So that means because Calcite Maps is built on Bootstrap, I can reuse all of these components too. It also means when I get stuck as a developer and I want to know how to do a drop down in a certain way or a modal dialog, I can just Google it and somebody has answered it somewhere on the internet. So it makes it super easy. You're not developing with a framework that's kind of just in a corner and you're not going to get any help. Or if Al's busy, I'm not going to answer your question or your issue on Calcite Maps itself. So that's kind of neat. All the other suspects like alerts and good things, panels, something that I use quite a bit. And then on the JavaScript side, there's a little tiny piece of JavaScript that's needed to basically glue things together. For example, if you wanted to do a modal dropdown, then you got to pull in a little bit of JavaScript to kind of make this happen. But the modules are really, really small. They're tiny, they're fast, they're lightweight, they're not going to get in the way. There's both jQuery and Dojo versions of the module. So if you want to do pure Dojo solutions, you can do that. And that's what I do for Calcite Maps, but you have the option. It'll work with both. Okay, so you get the idea. So it's this cool framework. It's this awesome HTML, CSS framework with components that we can use and we can build off of. And it's really the core of everything that Calcite Maps is. So Calcite Maps also brings the mapping framework to you to make your life easier, hopefully. There's really only three pieces. You have the nav bar at the top. You have this drop-down menu on the left. And you have panels. And for a simple mapping application, sometimes that's all we really need. And that's all it really provides. So the rest of it is just Bootstrap. It's whatever components you either need or don't need. And I'm going to show you how you can compile certain components into it, or you can remove them, so you can really fine-tune your deployment. Calcite Map styles. So Calcite Maps is designed so when you apply a class to an element, it will have a dramatic effect on the elements around it. So for example, I can add a class just to the layout, to the body tag, and it'll change the entire layout of the entire thing. So I'll show you this in a moment. So you can do top, bottom layouts, you can add margins. There's drop down, we can change in a couple different ways. Panels, we can move them around left and right. Themes, colors, widget themes, these kinds of things are built in. So, but they're all style classes, right? So the best way for me to kind of show you this is to show you this thing called Style Explorer. So Style Explorer is something that I wrote to test my own work, essentially. Just to show you where I'm at and where I came from, I just went to the Calcite Maps GitHub repo, and then if you just go to the doc link, you'll get this guy. So the Style Explorer is exactly that. It's going to allow us to explore some of the styling. And this is really nice because what it allows me to do as a developer is I can actually style out my app before I write it. I can kind of experiment with different user interfaces and color schemes and patterns before I write a line of code. And then I can just go grab the styles and apply them, and then I'm good to go. So this, to me, is a lot faster than building it from the ground up and then retyping in the different styles. So we'll just do something simple like we'll call this Dev Summit and an awesome place to learn about mapping. Okay, so we'll apply that. So the first thing up here is that these are overrides for Bootstrap. So Bootstrap doesn't have this out of the box. We have a primary and a secondary title, subtitle, some people call it, with a nice little divider in here. That's the first thing to notice. Another thing to notice about the nav bar is the nav bar can be fully collapsed. So now the nav bar is gone. And take that even further, now the panel's gone. So we do that so when you're on a mobile device and you're trying to digitize that last vertice on a line and you happen to hit the interface instead of the map, this gives you full screen access. So this is a nice feature, and that's why it's built that way. So you can turn that on and off, of course, just by adding and removing that menu item. So that's kind of fun. All right, so let's carry on. So again, I'm just using this Style Explorer to style and configure my app and play with some things. So let's go to Palm Springs. All right, so we'll just navigate in there. And for the keen folks out there, you'll notice that this is essentially the search widget, the 4x search widget. It's just embedded in here. It looks and it feels like the rest of the components, right? So there's a nice blend there. For the base map, we'll just do something like, let's do streets navigation. And we can do 2D, we can do 3D, we can do no D, it's up to you. This is actually using Bootstrap tab, all right? So these are just tab components that sit in a nav. There's no customization there, that's just straight Bootstrap out of the box, and it's tabbing these panes back and forth. So that's an option for me if I want that in my app. And then, of course, here we're showing up this, this pop-up. All right, so we'll move on to the theme things. So what we can do for Calcite themes, there's two stock ones. We can do dark or we can do light. And it kind of depends what your backdrop is, what the color shades are in your base map and so forth, but those are options. And then what we can do is take that a step further and pick some of the Calcite colors. So here are the color sets, not all of the colors, but some of the cool ones. So I'll pick dark blue as an example. So that's going to give me the Calcite dark blue, which is proven to work against this white text background. It's going to work all the time. And yeah, it's got accessibility qualification to it as well. So if that's important, that's here. So we can pick different colors. So we can do that. If we want to do a little bit of opacity, then we can do like Calcite blue 75%. All this is doing, this is adding a style class to my navbar. That's all it's doing in the background. There's not a whole lot of magic here. If we want to apply this everywhere, we can say apply to all. Then suddenly the panel experiences that color as well. So you can do this for like extreme branding if you want. So we can do any of the Calcite colors. We can go through here, pick the reds if we want, whatever we want. Right, if we want to get super crazy, we could do transparent. Right? Which isn't going to work everywhere, so we'll make sure we turn that off. But we can do transparent at the top, and that's actually kind of nice for some base map configurations. Like for example, if we do streets night, and let me go back and do dark text light, then actually that's not a bad app if I'm looking for this sort of immersive experience. This starts to break down and fail when you zoom in and go to different parts of the map when things get busy like that, but you can do it. I just wanted to show you it is there. Okay, so let's go back to something like just a dark blue for now. And so those are basically some of the classes that are built in. We could also do the widgets, so we could do widgets dark. Not a good example in this case. We probably would never do that in real life. But there we're back to the light widgets. So that's an option too. Again, just by adding, you're not even changing a CSS reference. You're just adding a class to in this case, it's the body. All right, so let's take a look at some of the layouts. So we can do like a bottom layout if we want. So that just shifted the entire focus of this application. Now when the user lands on the page, they're not staring at a title, they're actually looking at a plus minus control. And is this the best design? It kind of depends what you're after. So that's an option. And then the drop downs become drop ups, right? That's a little different. And then you can see here, we still have our tabs. That's gonna work just like normal. We have this little expander thing. I'll talk more about this in a moment, but we have this expander slide out. Okay, so that's one option, and then we can do like a marginal, which is kind of a floating style. If we want to do something like, one of my favorites is the inline left, which basically pulls the plus minus zoom slider off to the side. This is one of my favorite designs because it frees up this whole corner in here. It's something that the corners are so valuable in map app design, and this solves that problem. Let's see. The other way we could do is we could do inline right, kind of swap that around, and I mean this dramatically changes the user experience, right? Like you see the difference in the user experience here, where now they land on the site, the first thing they see is the info box in that corner, and that's the very valuable corner if you know anything about laying out web pages, right? People look to that corner a lot. So the focus of the app completely shifts from touching the controls to reading what's in front of me. So these are things that you can do for free quite easily. So I'll just go back to the settings dialog, and we'll just go back to sort of the standard layout for now. Other things we can do is work very well with the 4.0 API. For example, if I want to add widgets, I can grab a couple widgets and just add it to these corner boxes, or I can actually move them around. If I actually want to drop our locator down to the bottom, I can do that. All right, so that's actually not a Calcite Maps thing. That's just Calcite Maps working with the 4.0 API to make sure there's no overlap in the controls and the styling is still good and valid. Okay, so what else? We have padding we can control, panels left, right. We saw that already. Drop-down menu is probably one of the last things to show you. And so this is kind of the slider drawer, right? So when you use this, you might use this if you're building a mobile-centric application. People want that mobile feel where they tap once, tap on, tap off kind of thing. So that's available as well. And it really just depends on the type of application you're trying to build. I guess one of the last things, I'll show you that stuff later. I think that's about it. So I'll leave it at that. So this is the Style Explorer, and this is going to help you kind of lay out the design of your application before you write a stitch of code. And then at any point in time, of course, you can right-click and inspect some of the classes in there and just apply them to your app, right? And it becomes real easy. I'll show you how to do that in a moment. Okay. So that's Style Explorer. So to get started, what we can do is just go to Calcite Maps. Let's just open that up in another tab. And then, of course, we have to find that tab. Okay, here we go. So I'll spare you the details of going through the documentation, and we're just going to grab the source code that's right here on the Getting Started section. So grab this, and we'll start building this out so we can see how to lay this out. All right, so I'm going to put this in a JS bin. Just grab what's there, just paste in, and auto run that, and this is what we get. So this is like the most simple mapping Calcite Maps app in the world. So you'll see a few things happening right away. So the responsive design is automatically there. So when we hit 768, then that's when our panels become docked. And you'll notice that that's where the framework kicks in. So now when I dock the pop-up, it's not overlapping the panel. The panel actually went away, okay? So that's an important example of how the framework works in both mobile And then when we go to desktop mode, it works that way as well. So that's about the extent of the map app framework. It's just the ability to work with dockable controls and the other components that are built into some of these APIs. So let's take a look at what we have here. Just to demystify some of this, the first thing you'll see is a reference to Bootstrap. It's actually this thing called Calcite Maps Bootstrap, right? So what we can do, here's something fun. I'd like to do this just to make sure that Bootstrap hasn't broken anything, or I haven't broken anything. So you go to Getting Started, we can actually grab their CSS. Say, okay, this is the latest deployed CSS for Bootstrap. And if I've done everything right and not broken any rules, then we'll come over here and we'll grab my CSS and replace it for theirs. And you're probably asking yourself, well, what's the difference? When should I use their Bootstrap? Maybe you have your own Bootstrap. Maybe you've compiled your own CSS out using the compilers, right? So you can do that. Calcite Maps doesn't care. It just needs Bootstrap components to kind of get it going. And the difference between this one and mine, which I'll show you in a moment, is that it's compiled down with Sass and it's optimized and it's a lot smaller. Okay? But for right now, let's just prove the point that, and go to the point that this is actually Bootstrap. Next, we have whatever override we need. So here we have Calcite Maps. I'm using the 4.0 API at this point. So I'm grabbing the minimized CSS for the 4.0 API. If I was using Leaflet or Esri Leaflet, I'd plug in that module in there. So we build out a whole bunch of some modules. You're not getting CSS you don't need, I guess, is the bottom line. Make sense? Next, we just have our standard 4.3 JavaScript reference for the CSS. Nothing special here for our HTML. But then we have Calcite Maps in our body tag, and we're telling it where the nav is. So let's do something here. So I'll show you what was happening when we were using this Style Explorer earlier. So if I change this to bottom, I got to change another setting here too. We go down to dark, navbar fixed, bottom. So we'll do this. And we need to do a few other things. So that's going to move our navbar down at the bottom, but because 4.0 uses this concept of padding, so now what we're going to do is we're going to pad 0 to the top. We'll do 50 at the bottom, and this is going to refresh like every time I do this, but it's okay. So we'll do UI, and we can do UI padding, and actually that's an object, so let's objectify that. And we can do, I think, bottom, top 30. And that should give us the padding that we need to make this all work. And there it is. So now we've moved our nav down to the bottom, and that was it. So we had to tell the 4.0 controls to reposition themselves to take consideration where we moved our navigation to, but everything just works. It's that simple. All right, so let's meander a little further down through our stack here. And it's probably important to point out that there's really only 3 nodes. There is a navbar node. Let's just go here and top this up with a color. Let's do Calcite BG color, and we'll do dark blue. So this is just one of the styles that's available. So there we have our blue back. If we wanted to do some sort of transparency, then we would do blue 75. And there's a little bit of transparency in there if we wanted that. Okay, so that's that. We move down a little further in the stack. This is all just the, so if you want to add and remove menu items, these are just LI items, right? So here we just have the full map toggle, right? And then we have the base maps, which can pop up or pop down, disappear, and then we can just keep adding those. For every navigation item, we have the option of adding a panel. So this is an example of a panel, and in this case, let me just make this a little bigger so that panel pops up top. And so close. And we can swap out the base maps to whatever our favorite base map is. All right, so this is just the code for that, the HTML elements for that. Down a little further, you'll see that we have a reference to Dojo Bootstrap, and then finally Calcite Maps Dojo module. And these are tiny, tiny JS scripts just to ignite the framework itself. Then down a little further, we've got the 4.3 reference. Bring in a few modules. We bring in just drop down and collapse. These are the only two modules that we need because that's all we're doing is the drop up and the collapse. And beyond that, it's your favorite JavaScript code, right? It's just adding in whatever functionality you want. And then down here is where you see the integration with the pop-ups. So this is kind of important, right? So this is how the magic happens here when I open up this pop-up and I happen to have a panel and I really want to do the docking and focus the user on that particular experience, and then this is how that works. So it's basically a combination of Bootstrap and working with the JavaScript API watch functions. That's it. So there you go. There's your first Calcite map application if you haven't built one before, and that's how simple it is. And it's pretty straightforward. So if we take a look at some of the more advanced dev options, that's kind of what I wanted to show you here. What we can do is we could do some compiling and some good stuff. All right, so if we take a look at the size of the output, so here are all of the CSS modules that are output. And of course, all I really need is Bootstrap. So here's Bootstrap at 152 KBs. And let's see, yes, it's 152. So what I can do is come through here and I can grab one of these CSS modules, and I'm just going to comment this out and say, you know what, Bootstrap, I don't need print, I don't need breadcrumbs, I don't need pagination, I don't need all these things. Then I can recompile that. And after I build that out, I come up here and not go here. And oh boy. Find this guy. This is where it goes, out to this dist folder, just so you know. That's the whole reason I wanted to do this, right? And what we're really interested in is this Calcite. And we'll reveal that in Finder, and here we go. So now we're 136. So I went from 152 to 136 just because we removed some of the Bootstrap CSS modules. You can continue down that road and remove more and more modules as you need or do not need them. Okay, so and again, I have things in here like modals. You know, I may not need modal as an example. Okay, so that's basically the build system in a nutshell. If you're a SAS developer, then you're going to want to get your hands in here to like some of the variables. Like for example, you can change the breakpoints that I adhere to. So I've got an extra small, and then small, and you just basically change these in one place, and they basically propagate themselves through the entire CSS stack. And it makes it super easy to refine this to whatever kind of user experience you want. Okay? So that is that. The last thing I want to show you, I think is important, is some of the documentation. Oh, let me show you two things. Yeah, we'll do documentation, we'll do samples. So this is it. These are all of the styles available. So in the body tag, you can use these ones. So you can do, as you saw, nav top, bottom, margin, some different styles and setups for layouts. So you can do a medium-sized title, a larger title, different options. And then here, if you're using some of the other technologies, just 3x or 4x, or 3x or Esri leaflet, then you can position the pop-ups, the zoom controls automatically. Navbar, there's some here as well. Drop down, there's a couple here as well. That's about it. There is one thing I wanted to show you here for this app that we were building out. Is, let's say I didn't want, as you can see, it's kind of hiding underneath here. I have this kind of expando search thing. If you don't want that, then you can remove it. So it's as simple as going here to our search element. We'll remove that class. Now we have just the standard search in full size. So it's up to you if you want that in there or not. Okay, so that's that. The last thing is, yeah, let's, I guess, just look at the other examples. So if you're looking for more examples on how to implement these things. I encourage you to take a look at the sample apps. So this is one using 3x. So if you're a 3x developer, the framework's going to work just fine. If you want to discover what styles were used for this app, then they're in the info box right here. It makes it super simple for you to find these out. So there's that. This one uses ArcGIS JavaScript API 4, and this shows you how to use tabs. This one implements the drawer, right? So again, all of the styles are in the info box. Last one is Esri Leaflet. So again, it's just a framework. It doesn't care too much about the API used. So the info box can be popped up here. We can still do search. We can still look for things like Starbucks down in Portland, and we'll find one. So these controls have been calcified just slightly with having some corners and edges and stuff like that. Okay, so that's essentially Calcite Maps in a nutshell. Hopefully everybody gets it. It's a Bootstrap framework. It has a tiny mapping framework associated with it. It builds on the Calcite design project that we have at Esri internally. Now the last thing I'll show you is pretty exciting. This is all very, very recent work, and we just released this on Friday. So this is the Styler template. The Styler template is a new map app, configurable map app. And you can get this in ArcGIS Online today. And it's built on top of Calcite Maps. So nothing should surprise you here when we work through this. So, right, it supports 2D and 3D, so it's one code base, which is really nice. And it has all the configurability or stylability that Calcite Maps does. So it should make it easier to create style, and then sharing is also super important. So, excuse me, there's really two things you can do with it. So you can style apps kind of the standard way. So somewhere in here, right. So here I'm in the viewer, and I've got just a standard web map that I'm looking at. So let's share this out, and we'll go through the experience. So now you look for something called Styler, and you'll see it's called Map Styler, and there's also one for 3D scenes called Scene Styler. So we can select that, and we'll just pick the defaults here. And we'll start styling our map app. So we could change the title just like we did before. Let's just say we want to use Durango Trails, Explore Your World, something like that. We can tell it where to grab content for the about. Okay, so right now it's grabbing content from the description, which is fine. We can use that. We can go to colors. This should all look very familiar to you, right? We can do light colors. We can save that, see what it looks like. And of course, this is going to go, refresh, and apply the styles that we just looked at. So if we do something like that, we might want some color. So let's use blue again. That's fine. We won't do panels. Well, let's do panels. Why not? Then we can do layout. Again, all of the options we looked at before: top, bottom, medium, large. Docking position for the pop-up, any of the controls that we either want or don't want. In the panels, different panels we can turn on and off. I'll just turn this base maps one on as well. Search, this is really interesting. It's a kind of a hidden feature in here. It's called Find Places. I'll show you what this does in a second, but just make note of it. The other thing you can do is you can override at any point in time the default settings. And the other thing you'll notice is that there's this little control down here, and I call it a coordinate share control. So I can grab the coordinates out of here, go to map options, and I can dump in a different latitude and longitude. So let me just refine this a little bit. So I'm actually overriding the settings in a web map. So if you come across a web map and you want to create an app out of it, and you don't want to go back and change the actual map itself, you can change it here in the app, which is really neat. And what zoom level was that? So this, how cool is this? It actually has zoom level 9. Does that ever confuse you? Like, well, what is zoom level 9, right? Well, now you can see that what the scale is, because it has a scale beside it as well. So let's put 9 in here, because that's our zoom scale. And save that. See what we got. Right. Cool. All right, so let's launch this. And I'll show you what else you can do. So there's all kinds of neat things. So first of all, let's exercise the Calcite Maps stuff. That's really what this is, right? It's just built on what we just looked at. So let's just go to Durango. So we'll zoom in a little bit. All right. That's kind of cool. But we have this Find Places option. So I can click this, and this finds parks by default. If I want to change that POI find feature, I can look for coffee shops, or I can look for restaurants in the area. And again, this is using 4.0, so it's using the super cool pop-up and the ability to dock. We have all of that feature functionality that we had before. Okay, so that's one thing you get with the application configurable template. What else? So we can do other things like, let's see. We could swap the base map out and say, you know what, I really like this base map. And let's say when we're done, let's say we just zoom in a little bit here. Let me just go here, clear this out. See, this is really the experience that I want to share with people. So I can go down here, I can do two ways. I can go to this little share, and that kind of flips this card around. I can copy this. I can go to a new tab. I can paste this in. And you have to remember where we came from, right? We came from this, right? This was the app that we were configuring from the web map, right? But now we've just shared this thing out. Here's what it looks like. So what I'm showing you is that styler is completely configurable with the command line. So I can come along here and say, you know what, actually background color equals red, right? So when I enter that, now it's red. And if I want to do something like, well, actually the layout would be better suited on the bottom, then let's take that a step further. And I actually want the base map, even though I've overridden the base map, I'm going to override it again. And I'm going to create, let's do, if I can get this right, streets, vector, night. Let's see how close we can get it. Oh, I missed. But you can see how all the styling is possible just from the command line. So styler is kind of this super template, if you will. And let me show you where it lives. I think I've got a link to it here. So that's styling apps from existing web maps and scenes. What we can do is we can style apps on the fly, which means we don't have a web map. We have nothing. All we have is this thing living in the cloud. So let's go ahead and open this guy up. So we're going to view the application. Now this is just the configurable app template sitting there with nothing other than just itself, right? So we can start building this thing out. And we can say, all right, that's cool, but let's do ampersand, and we'll do title equals, dev summit. Same stuff as before. Do background color. Let's do transparent this time. And yeah, we'll just start with that. And of course, let me put the right guy in there. First guy's got to be a question mark. All right, so that's not quite as compelling as what I wanted. So let's go here, go back to Palm Springs. Zoom into the airport, and that's kind of cool. And let's get rid of transparent and make that like, you can just use dark. If you ever don't know what color you want, you can just use dark or light and default to that. Now here's a neat thing. So you can continually style out this app. So we can do things like the active panel equals about, and then we can do the about text equals hello everyone. And yeah, the list just goes on. So let's try that, and then we'll do one more. So there, our about panel pops up, providing the information that we provided in text, all just in the command line here. The last thing I want to show you is this piece here, where we can, let's go back to Palm Springs. All right. And what we want to do is, I'll show you the other way to do this customization is to do it right in line here. So for our base map, let's change our base map to satellite. So we'll do base map equals satellite and enter. Still in 2D, but gives us our satellite. What we can do at any point in time is go from 2D to 3D. So if I put in here web scene equals default and ampersand, I hit enter, then it's going to change our 2D map to a 3D map. And then if we want to create a more immersive scene, and this is really the perspective that we want, then we can change perspective, grab that, last one I promise, and we can share that out with our friends. Now we've completely configured and styled and created a map on the fly with command line parameters in the URL. Okay? Thank you. So in some ways, Styler is not only is it a next generation template using the ArcGIS 4 API, it's kind of the super template in that it can be shared out very easily, it can be styled very quickly. It's built on Calcite Maps, so now you know what's going on underneath the hood. So the mystery is solved. And yeah, there's some really cool examples. I encourage you guys to check these out. And these are examples of, like, here's an app that was styled just on the fly with these parameters right here. So this is an example of a New York map. This particular example takes a web map ID. So you have the option of passing in an ID, and it'll pull in, you know, all the styles and everything from the web map, except we've overridden some things here. And this uses bookmarks. That's kind of fun. Here's one of Big Bear, California. So these are just examples of the things you can create with just a couple lines of arguments and values in your URL. Yes, go ahead.
All those keywords that you're typing in and picking values, is that all in the help where you were showing us at the beginning?
I'm almost there.
Oh, okay.
It's a fantastic timing. So what I'm going to do is just zip over here to the repo itself. So in the repo itself, if you scroll down past the examples, then you get to configure parameters. So there's no mystery here. All the parameters that are supported, like lat, long, x, y, wick ID, the zoom, scale, rotation, all of these things that you can do at the command line are all itemized here. And then the values are itemized on the right-hand side. Okay, so you can decouple it any way you want. Okay, cool. And that's about it. That's about all we have time for. So we covered lots of things. We looked at Calcite as the design system. Can we have the lights, please, if we have a lights person back there? No? No lights person? All right, and then we looked at Calcite Maps as the design framework to help you guys build better mapping apps. And then at the very end, we looked at the new Styler template, right? It's brand new, hot off the shelf, just was released Friday. It's an app template, and the whole idea is, you know, it shouldn't be hard to create and style great, super awesome web mapping apps. And hopefully this framework will help you guys out. If you have any questions, post issues, please, on Calcite Maps or the Styler, and I'll get to them as soon as I can. Thank you very much.